Good morning. I'm Alice Newland, President of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County. On behalf of the League, I welcome you to our presentation today on ranked choice voting. This program is being recorded and will be available on our website, lwvmanatee.org. Any use of the recording, other than individuals viewing or sharing it, must get permission from the League. At the end of our presentations, our speakers will be taking questions. Please put your questions in chat for Terry Condos, our Voter Services Action Team Chair. And if you have a particular speaker you want it for, state what speaker the question is for. Ranked choice voting, also known as instant runoff, allows voters to rank candidates in order of their preference, first, second, third, and so forth, in races with more than two candidates. Ballots that do not help voters' top choices win count for their next choice. Maine was the first state to pass ranked choice voting and implemented it in 2018 in the 2022 election. Alaska, Nevada, and Maine use ranked choice voting on a statewide basis. There are particular categories of elections that are now using ranked choice voting, such as elections for judges or a specific party, such as the Utah Republican Party. There are quite a few municipalities that use ranked choice voting. Sarasota passed ranked choice voting, but in 2022, the Florida legislature banned the use of ranked choice voting in the state. We are very pleased today to have two excellent and qualified speakers on ranked choice voting. They will not only impart the basics of ranked choice voting and its current status and future prospects, but we will also hear from a key player in the passing and implementation of ranked choice voting in Maine. Our speakers today are Vilia Johnson and Anna Kellar. Vilia Johnson is Vice President of the League of Women Voters of Sarasota County and Team Leader for Advocacy. Vilia leads Florida's Speakers Bureau for Ranked Choice Voting, Florida, and has done numerous presentations around the state. Anna Kellar, a civic leader and executive director of League of Women Voters of Maine, is uniquely positioned to speak about the Maine ranked choice voting experience. Anna was active during the push to pass the legislation and its implementation. They lead Democracy Maine, an innovative collaboration that includes the League of Women Voters of Maine, Maine Citizens for Clean Elections, and Maine Students Vote. So, Vilia?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today. I'll share my screen. And is that appropriate, Alice? Is that working?
It looks perfect.
Good. Okay. All right. Before we begin, I would love to see a show of hands of those who are familiar with ranked choice voting. If you can give me, I know most of you have your screens off, but if you can just give me a wave, a show of hands of people who are familiar or are not familiar with ranked choice voting. Okay, there's several who are, and that's great. Some are not, and that's very typical. So we really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this topic today. The League of Women Voters, the core mission and part of the most important focus is on voting. Okay, my slides are not forwarding. Sorry, give me a sec. There we go. Okay. So as I said, voting is a top priority and part of the core mission of the League. So what kind of reforms and improvements are we striving for? Let's take a moment to imagine voting in an ideal election. What might that look like? There would be a large and diverse field of candidates to choose from. Candidates with similar views could compete without concern about splitting the vote. Candidates are civil to each other, and if they share similar views, they might even campaign together. Just imagine, they focus on issues rather than attacking each other. They reach out, appealing to more voters rather than just their own narrow base of support. You can select the candidate who truly represents your views without fear of wasting your vote, because your vote will always matter. Winners are chosen by consensus rather than by appealing to extremes, and have the approval and support of the majority of voters. Well, in light of recent contentious elections, this may sound like happy talk, but ranked choice voting is a simple change that can help align our electoral process with the public interest and result in outcomes like those just described: civil, inclusive, and more representative elections. At the 2020 National Conference, League of Women Voters US established the recommended standards for electoral systems shown here. I highly recommend that you read the comprehensive position on page 51 of the current Impact on Issues report. These standards support systems that empower voter choice and more inclusive and representative elections. Ranked choice voting meets these standards and fulfills the recommendations of LWV US for equitable and effective representation, as well as support for alternative electoral methods at the state and local levels. Today, we'll cover some of the problems commonly caused by our current plurality system, where the candidate with the most votes wins, even if they do not have majority support. I'll explain how ranked choice voting allows voters to rank candidates in order of preference rather than having to choose just one. We'll see how it works and how it diminishes many of the problems stemming from plurality voting, bringing us closer to the ideal election described earlier. And then we'll go to Anna to hear about her experience, their experience, and then open for questions and discussion. I'm afraid we're all too familiar with the problems created or intensified by our current plurality system. Our choices may be limited because some potential candidates refrain from running out of fear of not making the top two or of being a spoiler candidate. Many votes are wasted, leaving voters feeling unrepresented and with less incentive to participate. In 2020, over 3 million votes were cast in the Democratic presidential primaries before some candidates withdrew. This included almost 15% of the total votes cast in Florida in that election. In 2016, 600,000 Republican presidential primary voters experienced the same loss of voting power. All those voters cared enough to be sure their vote was cast early, yet their vote was wasted because the candidates withdrew before Election Day. In plurality elections, the candidate with the most votes wins. That works when there's only 2 candidates, but now most races now field numerous candidates. In a crowded race, winners may be the choice of as few as 25% of the electorate, which equates to not being the choice of 75% of voters. Consider the results of Florida's 19th congressional district primary shown here. The winner received 23% of the vote. We have no way of knowing from this election if he had majority support, if he had broad support, I should say. Research indicates that members entering Congress after winning with less than 35% of the vote are significantly less representative of their district and significantly more ideologically extreme. In other words, the mechanics of how we vote can foster extremism. All these problems can be addressed by a simple change. Ranked choice voting, also known as instant runoff voting, is a nonpartisan reform that gives voters the option to rank any number of candidates in order of preference. If a candidate receives more than 50% of the vote, they win. However, if no one wins by more than 50%, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated, and those ballots are redistributed to the voter's second choice. The votes are recalculated, and these instant runoffs repeat until one candidate emerges with majority backing. Here's an example ballot. With plurality voting, you could only select one candidate, but with ranked choice voting, you rank your preferences. My first choice is Althea Sharp. Even though I know she doesn't have much of a chance, I can vote for her without feeling that I'm wasting my vote. My second preference is Phil, who is likely to be the top vote getter. I can vote for Phil or Valerie without hurting Althea's chances. I don't care for George at all, so no ranking for him. If no candidate has a majority in the first round, the candidate in last place is eliminated. So if Althea is eliminated, my vote goes to Phil, and I'm fine with that. I was able to vote my true preference and know that my vote was not wasted. The voting process is simple to understand, but how are the ballots counted? Here's a range of candidates on the political spectrum. We begin by counting only the voters' first choices and check for a majority winner. Bright orange is the first choice of a majority of winners of voters, so she wins in round one. But what if there's not a majority winner in the first round, as is so often the case? Here, no one received 50% in the first round. So what happens next? We eliminate gold, who has the least amount of votes, and those ballots are redistributed. Now orange has 44%, purple has 36%, light purple has 20%. Once again, no one has more than 50%. What do we do next? We'll eliminate light purple, and that 20% of the votes are redistributed to the voter's next choice. And the winner is dark purple with 55% of the vote. The current system would have elected bright orange in round one, but we can clearly see that more voters prefer a purple candidate. Typically, the first round winner does prevail, but RCV opens the field to allow more candidates and changes the tone to a more civil campaign. The result is true majority preference. And now you get to try ranked choice voting. I'm going to say something that you never hear in a presentation, and that is take your phone out and open the camera app. If you focus on the QR code, a website will pop up. You'll have a pop-up that will take you to rcv123.org. And we are going to vote on what our favorite dessert is. So you will see a ballot. And you can also see that you can only vote for one in each column. But you'll just need to rank your choices. Again, you don't have to rank every choice. Just rank your favorites. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a button to push for that says vote. And then it will take you to see the results. And once you go to the results, you'll see the bar chart that has the results of the voting. This ballot has been used numerous times, so there's already more votes in there than just the call today. But I think you'll see on the left, there's a slider, and you can go back and forth between the rounds of tabulation to see how things shook out. And what I typically find is that key lime pie is an early leader because brownies and chocolate cake are splitting the vote. They're splitting the chocolate vote. So you can see that once chocolate cake drops out, brownies is the clear winner because otherwise key lime pie would have been the winner. I don't think anybody's unhappy with any of those choices, but I hope that's helpful in showing you how the ballots are tabulated. So think about this for a second. Does this make sense to you? And can your organization use this method to reach consensus? Might you have a more inclusive and representative outcome by using RCV? We'll come back and take questions on that at the end if you have any. How does ranked choice voting meet the LWV US standards for electoral systems? Voters can express their true preferences and are more likely to be engaged. The system encourages more candidates to run by allowing a field with similar views to run without fear of splitting the vote. The tabulation is verifiable and auditable. RCV also eliminates the need for additional rounds of voting, saving the entire cost of a runoff election. I'm sure you're all familiar with this Georgia Senate runoff last December. This election cost Georgia taxpayers $75 million. It's estimated that between the two races, the two candidates spent over $300 million. We also know that typically fewer voters participate in runoff elections, so results may be less representative. This runoff had 400,000 less voters than the general election. Possibly the most important benefit of ranked choice voting is that it turns negatives into positives. Candidates do best by staying positive and reaching out across ideological, ethnic, and racial spectrums to the broadest coalition of voters. This lessens the incentive to run a negative campaign and encourages civility. If Alice and I are running for city commission, I'm not going to say anything bad about her. Instead, I'll say to her supporters, Alice and I agree on many issues, so please rank me as your second choice. There's a great story from an RCV candidate debate in Minneapolis, where at one point the candidates linked arms on stage and literally sang Kumbaya, refusing to insult one another out of fear of losing votes. Ranked choice voting improves representation for women, both on the ballot and in office. This chart shows on the left, representation for women in cities using plurality voting increased by 5% over a 24-year period. On the right, cities using RCV had an 11% increase in representation for women. Currently, in city and county government in the US, women typically hold less than 30% of offices. Over the last decade, in the 19 cities that use RCV, 46% of all mayors and 49% of all city council seats are held by women. Ranked choice voting promotes diversity because it allows multiple candidates appealing to the same community to run without splitting the vote. Compared to winner-take-all elections, more people of color are running and winning in RCV cities with minority populations. The same study from the last slide shows in the chart on the left, minority representation increased 3% in cities using plurality voting. That's an improvement. However, on the right, there was a 19% increase in minority representation in cities using RCV. That is significant. Around the world, ranked choice voting has been used for years, even decades, in national and local elections, including up to 100 years in Australia. Canada's largest political parties use RCV in their nomination process. India uses it to elect their president. New Zealand and the United Kingdom use it in local elections. In the United States, ranked choice voting is currently used statewide in Maine, Alaska, and in more than 60 counties and cities, with more adopting it every year. It's used in local elections from liberal New York City to conservative Utah. In total, more than 13 million voters nationwide live in jurisdictions that use or plan to implement RCV. Where does the League of Women Voters stand? In 2007, the St. Petersburg, Florida League did a study on voting process and recommended instant runoff voting. The Florida League chose not to embrace instant runoff at that time due to perceived complexity and lack of experience with that method. LWV Florida does not currently have a position on ranked choice voting. Since that time, leagues in 12 states have done studies on ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting, and the 20 states shown here support one of those methods. LWV US currently does not have a position supporting RCV at the federal level. However, LWV US does encourage state and local leagues to use the position on electoral systems in the Impact on Issues report to inform their advocacy around state and local legislation regarding ranked choice voting. What is the status in the state of Florida? Ranked choice voting was passed by Sarasota voters in 2007 with an overwhelming majority of 78% for use in city commission races. It was never implemented due to resistance from the Secretary of State. Several other cities also supported ranked choice voting. Last year, under SB 524, the Florida legislature prohibited RCV for all elections in Florida, specifically calling out the existing ordinance in Sarasota. Legislators cannot give a convincing rationale when asked about their objections. Governor DeSantis said in his 2018 campaign that cities should be the incubators of democracy. And as supporters of home rule, of course, we believe cities should be able to decide for themselves how to run their local elections. Ranked choice voting has drawn support as a sensible solution to problems with our elections from political leaders that crosses party lines. As early as 2002, Senator John McCain and then State Senator Barack Obama were supporting legislation for ranked choice voting. RCV has endorsements from editorial boards, scholars, and more than 10 Nobel Prize winners. It's recommended in numerous comprehensive studies in election reform. And if you're a mature person like me and get your AARP bulletin, the November issue has an interview with the conservative columnist David Brooks, who mentioned ranked choice voting as his first recommendation for improving our national divide, shall we say. I also listened to a podcast, I think the date was October 30th, on NPR Politics podcast, where they talked about how to fix Congress, and ranked choice voting was mentioned there as well. There's a lot of press on a regular basis about it. What do RCV opponents have to say? I'm showing actual quotes from people or articles opposed to RCV. Some say that the process is confusing. Anytime you change the way people vote, there is potential for confusion. So implementation of RCV would require a nonpartisan voter education campaign. And I know just the organization to help with that. Yes, voters would need instruction on how to cast their vote, and it does require more preparation to rank multiple choices. Many would see that as a good thing. But do voters who use RCV in fact find it confusing? Multiple exit surveys show that where ranked choice voting is already in use, voters overwhelmingly complete valid ballots and large majorities rank multiple candidates. Voters across demographic groups, education levels, and income levels show high rates of understanding and satisfaction with the RCV ballot. Up to 99.8% of the ballots are completed without error, which is comparable to the plurality system. Some infer that ranked choice voting is a partisan scheme designed to help one party or another. Such concerns are simply wrong. Election reviews show that both major parties can be very successful at earning the majority of the vote in a state or district they dominate. Ranked choice voting is simply a tool to support majority rule and give voters the freedom to vote for the candidates they prefer. Sometimes it may help Democrats, sometimes it may help Republicans. Sometimes it may help an independent or third-party candidate. Who it always helps is voters. They get greater choice, have a stronger voice, and elect candidates who represent more voters. The ideal of a representative democracy. To create your own poll for your organization, go to rcv123.org. It doesn't need to be political. One of our members uses it to determine the budget priorities for her homeowners association. You might use it as a group to determine what movie you want to go to or what toppings for the pizza. It's very simple to use. One key obstacle RCV faces right now is lack of awareness. Most Americans don't know there is another way. So more league members, elected officials, and activists need to learn about ranked choice voting. Help us build awareness locally and statewide by sharing this presentation, which is in the state toolbox for Speakers Bureau, and recommend other organizations that may benefit from learning about RCV. You're welcome to contact me at vilia@lwvsrq.org. Ranked choice voting is the fastest growing election reform in the nation. If you think our political system is broken, if it leaves you feeling exhausted, outraged, or just thinking there has to be a better way, consider ranked choice voting. It changes the incentives for candidates and results in better choices, better campaigns, and better representation. No single reform is a panacea that meets all of the challenges, but ranked choice voting is a great start. And now I would love to hear what Anna can tell us about what happened in Maine and how this was accomplished in Maine.
Thanks, Vilia. So many of the things that you're bringing up in your presentation make me think about examples that we've had in Maine. I mean, really starting with this central question of what is the problem that ranked choice voting is solving, or what is the world that we want to be building toward that it's helping us get to. In Maine, we have a long tradition of independent candidates and third parties being a small but vibrant part of our political system. And that meant that we also have a long history of there being a spoiler problem. This really came to a head for us in 2010 when we had a candidate elected for governor with 39% of the vote. Very divisive governor, far right. We had an independent and a Democrat splitting the vote. That experience for a lot of people was very mobilizing to say there has to be a better way. What are the alternatives? The League was in exactly the right place to start answering some of those questions, because our league had just done, at the state level, had just done a study. We took up looking at ranked choice voting and alternative voting methods because the city of Portland, where I'm from, had just created a new position of an elected mayor and was looking at using ranked choice voting for that elected mayor position. So we were thinking about the issue at that point. Our league decided that ranked choice voting made a lot of sense as the most efficient way to solve this problem of spoiler, much better than a runoff, and because it helped voters be able to choose candidates that most closely reflected their beliefs and therefore improved our representative democracy. So our league at the time was an all-volunteer organization, very active in state advocacy, but looking for ways that we could continue to make our democracy better, and became part of a coalition that was bringing forward a bill and thinking about a potential ballot initiative. At that point, we did a lot of voter education. We did a lot of talking to legislators. League members were very active members of speakers bureaus like Vilia is doing now. And we were part of the campaign that eventually collected the signatures and then put ranked choice voting on the ballot in 2016. We won with 53% of the vote, and then had to fight for the next 2 years to get it implemented. I won't go into detail about the provisions in the Maine state's constitution that meant that our law was challenged, but we ultimately had to go to the state Supreme Court. Then the legislature repealed part of our law. But we have a process called the People's Veto in Maine. And so we were able to collect the signatures to get another initiative on the ballot and also halt the repeal, which left us with the very odd situation that in 2018, for our primary elections in June, we had both the first use of ranked choice voting in a statewide election, and voters were voting on whether to keep it. And that ended up working out very well for us, because the time that people like ranked choice voting the best is between using it and when they find out what the results are. Because at that point, there are no one's candidates lost. But people, once they start using it, realize that it makes sense. And that was our experience overall. But our league took on a major role throughout all of that, but especially about the voter education. We were able to receive some grants from national institutions that helped boost our outreach. This was also at the point where our league was able to get staff for the first time to help manage this big campaign. And what it let us do was take things that we'd always done, like our voter guide or candidate forums or outreach to community partners, and really supercharge that because we needed to reach voters about ranked choice voting, but of course we needed to reach them about everything else they needed to know as voters as well. And so for us, ranked choice voting has been a pathway to really the growth of our league and better, better connections with our community, better connections with national partners. It's been something that's helped Maine have a real role in the national movement around democracy reform, and has been, from the perspective of our league, taking that chance of getting involved in this strange new policy and the campaign has been very beneficial to us and all of our goals. From a perspective as a voter, ranked choice voting has been really good. It hasn't solved every problem. No silver bullets, no one solution that's going to make everything in the world better, but it has made a difference. And that has shown up in a couple of places for us. One is that we have seen it make the difference in elections, that candidates that would have otherwise lost votes to a third-party candidate and maybe not been elected ended up getting elected. We saw that happen at the federal level. We've seen that happen at the state and local level as well. We've seen it make a really big difference for us in primary elections where, for example, in 2018, we had an open seat for governor. We had 7 Democrats and 4 Republicans running in their respective primaries. And for example, in that Democratic primary, we had candidates cross-endorse each other. And what had happened at the end was that candidates really quickly came together around the nominee, who at that point they could really show had the support of the majority of the party. And it allowed the primary to be a much less divisive thing within the party as well. And the last thing that I want to mention about the impact is that I think in some ways we've seen the greatest measure of this at the local level. So Portland, Maine uses ranked choice voting for mayor, and then we expanded to city council and school board, passed with 86% of the vote because people liked it so much for mayor that when thinking, well, shouldn't we use it for everything? And since we've had it, our city council is now discounting our mayor, the 8 members of our city council are all either women or people of color. We have 6 of the 8 are women, and our school board as well is now majority people of color. We have, and this is in a city that is about 70% white. It's been very dramatic in the sense that who's been able to run and the dynamics around those races have made a difference. So those statistics that Vilia showed, especially at that local level where we'd have nonpartisan municipal elections. But those questions about representation, who steps forward, who is able to be in those positions and really represent different parts of the community, ranked choice voting has made a big difference there. And so it has unfortunately gotten more partisan as time has gone by because of the winners of a few of those first elections. But at its core, this is about benefiting voters and getting our representatives closer to what voters actually want. And that's not partisan. And I do believe that in time, we will see that the results in Maine don't end up benefiting one party over another, except in as much as voters might choose to vote for one party over another. And so we really take the long view here that this is a system that's here to stay. We've been able to expand it since it passed to presidential elections. Now we're looking at getting it for our governor general elections, which was the part that got struck down by our state Supreme Court, but we think we have a pathway to get it back. We're looking at more municipal expansion. So we're really big supporters and think that it helps us solve a variety of the different problems that we can face at that level. And as part of we say the league making democracy work, ranked choice voting is a great tool to have and a piece of making our democracy work better. So I don't want to talk too much about the details, because really what I want to do is answer your questions and leave lots of space for that, whether about the policy or our experience or how it's impacted our league.
Okay, great. Alice, did
Thank-
you?
Yeah,
There
thank
you
you.
go. Okay.
Thank you, Anna. And we will go now to Terry. Terry, do we have any questions in chat?
We have just a couple so far, but I encourage everyone to type in additional ones. One of them is a simple housekeeping one. Vilia, people weren't quick enough at writing down your email address. So if you could, I think it was something like Vilia at lwvsarasota.org, but we'll get that in the chat.
Okay.
So then a question for Anna. So the question is, for ranked choice voting implementation, was or is there any constitutional issue with defining the winner as plurality?
Yeah, so the Maine state constitution has a provision that says that the winner of the general election for governor and state legislature needs to have the plurality. There are different ways of interpreting that, and that has to do with whether you think that a vote in a ranked choice system is who you rank first, or whether the vote is the total of all of your preferences. Our state Supreme Court ruled that it was just those first rankings, and so therefore the ranked choice system that required the majority was not constitutional under that. Since then, that was in 2017. Since then, the Alaska Supreme Court, that has a very similar constitution, ruled the opposite way and explicitly said Maine was wrong. They didn't consider this correctly. Here's why. It's unusual that you get a court that actually literally says the other state was wrong, and that's what they said. So we're looking right now at going back. We're talking to a lot of lawyers, both in state and out of state. Our Supreme Court's had a lot of turnover since 2017. But we also think that we can pass legislation that just specifies that when you're talking about a ranked choice vote, the vote is your ranking. It's all of those preferences. And so when you get to the final round, and a candidate has that majority, they also have the plurality at that point. And so that if we define it that way, it fits neatly within our Constitution. And so we're looking at that approach to help to strengthen this, so that it's not getting at that issue. Side note that the Maine Constitution has this plurality requirement because prior to the 1870s, Maine had a requirement that the governor had to win a majority. And if they didn't win a majority, there was no ranked choice voting. Just if they didn't win a majority, the state House of Representatives decided who the governor was. And we almost had a coup because there was a giant fight, literally people bringing guns to the state house in a situation around that. And they thought, this seems like a bad idea. Let's just require the plurality. And so when I look at that, I'm thinking, well, what they were intending to do was to reflect the will of the voters in the governor and have a governor who had that support of the voters. That's what their intention was, both around the original majority language and around the plurality language. And so we're really in keeping with that spirit. But, sometimes I think, yes, politics is intense now, but also there are all kinds of strange things buried back in our history when we look at how we got to where we are now, too.
Thank you, Anna. I'm going to give this next question to Vilia, and I think this is just like a technical question of just about how RCV works. How are votes redistributed after the first round?
Well, if there's no winner in the first round, the ballots for the people who, the candidate who had the lowest total is eliminated. and the ballots are redistributed to the second choice of those ballots. Then again, if there's no winner with more than 50%, again, whoever the candidate with the lowest total is eliminated. And again, those ballots are redistributed. Now, maybe then it goes to the voters' third preference, but it would just keep going through the pecking order. And then sometimes, because if I do a live presentation, we do live paper ballots, and sometimes we get ties. And of course, the voting machines have the computers have a little bit more sophisticated system than I do with my paper ballots, but they can also say, okay, how many votes were put this person in first place? And so they can go back and figure out if there is a tie, who still should have priority in the preference order. And I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think probably some people are still wondering, okay, once you've eliminated, so when you eliminate that bottom
Right.
Ranked choice, since their number one choice is eliminated, then their number two choice, they get additional votes.
That's where their vote goes, is to their number two choice.
Okay.
And if again, that candidate is eliminated, it would go to their number three choice. It would go all the way through, unless, that's why I'm saying, if you don't like somebody, don't rank them, because you don't want your vote ever getting there. So.
Okay, great. Okay, another question has to do with, obviously it's a different process, and so it would take longer for an individual voter to vote. So what kind of evidence or experiences are there with how RCV impacts the ability logistically of voting sites to get voters through the process?
I haven't really heard anything about that, because I think, especially with ranked choice voting, voters prepare before they come. And so once they get there, it's just like how you bring your document to the voting booth if you're voting live. Or so I think that's part of why so many people vote by mail now, is so you can sit there at the kitchen table and figure it all out. But otherwise, you would just bring your document to the voting booth and rank them. Just like it would be just like having more races when you have to prepare more materials. And so some people, you saw one of those quotes that somebody who was against it said, well, the voters have to understand how to rank their choices. Okay, we do that every day. If they're out of vanilla ice cream, you get chocolate. It's a simple choice that we make every day. It's just that when it's candidates, you have to do a little more preparation. One of the objections that came out that I'd heard by people who personally used the vote, who voted in the New York City elections, because when New York City used it first used it 2 years ago, I think it was, and it totally changed everything about their city commission races. But in the mayoral race, they had like 16 candidates, and people just got exhausted by having to go through. Well, you have to think about, is candidate number 12 through 16, are they really going to be in the mix? Or do you really have to say, look, I'm most interested in these 3 or 4, and that's who I'm going to focus on. And there is a big national movement with ranked choice voting about final 5. You've heard of top 2, but there's the top 5, where there's a regular general election that brings it to the top 5 candidates, and then you use ranked choice voting in those top 5. And that's what Alaska is doing, right, Anna?
They have top 4, but yeah, final 4,
yeah.
5. I mean, I think you can argue about which is 4 or 5 is better, but it's the same idea,
right,
that you use ranked choice voting at that point once you've narrowed it down. And there are some jurisdictions that limit the number of rankings you can have. But it's also, and this will be interesting to see with New York City, the first time we had ranked choice voting in Portland for mayor, we had 15 candidates. We've never had anywhere near that many. And I think it was that first usage, and it was also the first time we had an elected mayor, people were like, yeah, I'm going to run and jump in. And the thing is, the person who had the plurality after the first round was still ended up with the majority and ended up winning, but it took until all 15 rounds for that person to get over that majority threshold. We had 5 candidates for running for mayor this year, and it's still exactly the same thing happened, where the candidate that had the plurality of first choice votes ended up winning, but very, very narrowly getting that majority in the end. And it's been interesting hearing from candidates who are saying, well, I guess, did it matter? We didn't need ranked choice, but still saying, well, it's a lot better going into governing knowing that I had 50% of people with me than knowing that I had 30% of people with me and that the majority preferred somebody else. They might have had somebody else as their first choice, but now I know that I do have that mandate because I had the majority of people with me. And that does make a difference, even for the candidate that the outcome wouldn't have changed. And then the last thing I just wanted to say was that we find that people really, really love the voter guide in elections where they have and our candidate forums and all of these things, because if you just have to pick one person, maybe that's a choice you kind of, you're like, okay, I made my choice, I'm done. Once you start thinking, oh, but do I want to rank this person? Voters need more information. And that is, that's the pro and the con of it. But we want informed voters. We want people to be able to make nuanced decisions, and it provides a real hunger for some of the services that the league can be helping to fill. We had a lot of people take our voter guide into the polling booth with them, looking at here's how I want to rank things. And we do see some candidates, some voters spoil their ballots, make a mistake on and have to go get a new ballot, but not at a much higher rate than typically. And we've seen, I did that once. I was thinking about something else and I got distracted and I marked the wrong bubble. And I thought, great, here I am explaining this to people. And then I thought, this is exactly the kind of thing. This wasn't about ranked choice voting. This was just me being stupid that day. It's not a big deal. And I went and got another ballot and I filled it back out again. But we do see that happen occasionally. And I think a lot of this is just practice, and also that a new system draws attention to the kind of human error and gaps in voter education that might be existing already. So maybe the silver lining of that is it gives us an opportunity and sometimes resources to go out and do the voter education that we needed to be doing anyway, but we weren't doing under the existing system.
Okay, so Anna, you talked quite a bit there about how, more examples of how it's played out, but back to the specific question, were there any real issues in the voting site processes, when you did RCV because of time, or did that really not play out? And then a related question is, did municipalities or voting mechanisms, did they have to get new voting machines, and are there multiple vendors?
Yeah, so to the first question, no, it doesn't take more time to fill out the ballot. That race might take by a matter of seconds, slightly more time for somebody, but not in a way that impacts the voting experience. It does sometimes take longer to find out the results. They might run the tabulation the next day or 2 days later. Initially, we were really concerned about that. You don't know the results right on election day. People survive. That's okay. You wait a couple days and you find out the results then. We were very worried about how candidates would behave, how election administrators would handle it, and it's actually really been fine. People have dealt with it and felt like, okay, well, we'll see where the results are in a couple of days, and they manage. So that part is just on a timing question I did want to mention. And then in terms of the voting machines, so in Maine, we were lucky that the systems, municipalities all lease their voting machines from the state under this, and all use the same. And so we use machines from the company ES&S. They have software that works with ranked choice. At this point, my understanding is I think all but one of the major election vendors has the ability to use ranked choice, and I believe that one is going to have it soon. So this was a bigger issue a few years ago, but at this point, we're really seeing the election systems catch up. And so typically, whatever the existing vendor that a state or municipality is using, they're able to run ranked choice ballots with that system at this point. There's considerations, and the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center is a great nonprofit that really helps think through some of those issues and work with election administrators about it. But there's a lot of resources out there to help navigate those changes.
And Terry, I can't promise for every county in Florida, but there was this big dramatic update on the Florida voting systems some years back after we had that problem. But I know Sarasota can use these systems in Sarasota can use it. It's just a matter of a software update, and I'm pretty sure that would probably apply for all the districts in Florida.
Okay, great. Thanks, Vilia. And another question for you. Could you speak a little bit to how I think you used the word supercharged voter education? I think not just with regard to RCV, but in general, we just keep seeing the same faces over. So how do we reach beyond our normal constituency and our normal audience?
Yeah. So for us, it was a combination of building partnerships with other community organizations and getting information into the hands of people who are going to be talking to voters anyway. So that, that looks like a variety of different things we've done. We've really reached out to a lot of different community organizations, social service providers, schools, everybody you could think about. And we particularly were trying to figure out which voters tend to be low voter turnout communities already, and reaching to organizations that are serving those communities and saying, hey, are you having a meeting? We could come have somebody do a quick presentation. Here are resources you could use if you want to do that presentation. Here are handouts that you could take and bring along with you while you're going door to door with on another issue. We tried to provide as much information in as many different formats as we could to people who are already going to be talking to their community members. And those relationships have been wonderful because we keep learning more and more about what these different communities need. We did invest in making translations of all of our materials. And that, I think, was a really important first kind of investment in those relationships, because it showed that we were really taking seriously reaching communities that don't always get reached. Maine doesn't require any translated ballots. We don't have any communities that fall under Federal Voting Rights Act language access requirements. And so showing that we were putting that effort in to reach communities was really meaningful. And then we had, at the times, enough resources to do some of the more typical kind of campaign-like tactics, where we ran a small TV ad we realized that people in the media market in far northern Maine weren't getting the information. It was much harder to reach them through a lot of those in-person and community methods, but that people did watch their local TV news, and that if we had fun coming up with what our sort of PSA spot on local TV would be. And we were able to get a national funder to give us the resources to be able to run that. We did a few radio ads as well. So we've really tried to leave no stone unturned and just think, well, what are all of the different ways we can reach people? And some things we do are kind of resources that are great and across the board for everyone, like our voter guide, and some things that we've tried to then tailor to particular communities, but as much as possible, because like I said, we've got more resources. We're like, at the time we were a staff of 6, we're a staff of 7 now. We've got a lot of volunteers. We're big for a state league in that sense, but we're still small in terms of the grand task of reaching all of those voters. And so as much as possible, we've tried to mobilize what the league has, which is our reputation, and the fact that we're known for providing good information and nonpartisan information and trustworthy information, and that we can talk to people across the political spectrum, and we can talk to people who are both in sort of a campaign and political world, and people like social service organizations like Goodwill, for example, who are interested in helping their community members be engaged, but are very scared of being seen to be involved in politics. And we can sometimes build those relationships in ways that another organization might not be able to. And so the League has this really fantastic role of being able to be a connector and then helping everyone who's out there in the community reach their voters as much as possible.
Thank you. Thank you both. This has been excellent. There's many questions that were answered for me. The time to get information out, but I really like the one about plurality, because we have been saying in our state, well, and in our county, we can't do it because plurality. They win by plurality. Well, eventually they do win by plurality. It's also by majority. So that's great. So so thank you both very, very much. This will be posted before the day's over, and it'll be on YouTube and also on our website in the video area. Our website is lwvmanatee.org. We do have a number of events coming up. Invite everybody. November 30th at 5:30 is our every other month Taste of the League. We invite not only our members, but we encourage you to invite others. All are invited. This month we are going to be highlighting our gun safety action team, which in less than a year they just have taken off. They've developed a whole program. They have been giving lots of presentations. They were at the tabling, I know, at the Turning Points Health Expo, or they gave out a whole bunch of gun locks and a gun safe. So they're doing a great job. Our next hot topics is Monday, January 8th, and the topic is the status of women in Florida. So thank you all. And I think we have like 1 minute left if anybody wants to comment.
Well, I think there was one really great question that I think is right for Vilia. So given what the legislature has done, what would be a way ahead for ranked choice voting in Florida?
Well, we know that it's a long road, but we also feel like at some point, because of the national momentum, we feel like once the governorship changes, that there'll be an opportunity, because when the lobbyists for Rank My Vote Florida spoke with the legislators, including the one who added the amendment, added the point about ranked choice voting, they didn't even know what it was. They were doing what they were told to do. And the governor's position was, if they do it in New York City, we won't do it in Florida. And so we feel like, the short term is not so good. But when you look at that, every other state in the Southeast uses ranked choice voting for overseas ballots, for military and overseas. So we're the only state in the Southeast that's not using it in some way right now. And we just feel like the momentum is on our side. And we just want to keep educating people about it so they can understand it. Everybody I talk to, no matter what the political point of view, when they learn about it, they say this makes so much sense. And my husband's a great example. He and I are at polar opposites, but we both agree that this is a great solution to bring things together. So,
and I would encourage Vilia's email is in chat, and she would be happy to do additional presentations. So
very happy. Yes. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You.
I'm going